Hey everybody, welcome back to the channel. In the 1990s, the NBA's slogan was NBA action is fantastic. And it really was. There was all this great holdover talent from the 80s, like Hakeem Olajuwon with the Houston Rockets, who would terrorize opponents on offense and defense and eventually win 2 NBA titles. Karl Malone of the Utah Jazz, who would be a perennial title contender, and while not winning a championship, did push Michael Jordan and go toe-to-toe with him twice in 1997 and 1998, coming up just short of a title. And, of course, MJ himself, Michael Jordan of the Chicago Bulls, who had a lengthy career with the Bulls starting in 1984, winning 6 NBA titles, 2 three-peats in the 1990s. And in the 1990s itself, there was plenty of great talent that was drafted. This included people like Kobe Bryant, who would play his entire career with the LA Lakers and win multiple championships. Tim Duncan, who would play his entire career with the San Antonio Spurs and win multiple championships. And Shaquille O'Neal, who would play with several different teams, but would also win multiple championships. The 1990s also had some drafts that weren't so great, and that's what we're going to focus on. So these are the worst drafts in the NBA in the 1990s. The first draft is the first draft of the 1990s, and that's the 1990 draft. Outside of Gary Payton, who would go on to make it to the NBA Hall of Fame, this draft just wasn't great. There were some players that did make some impacts. The rest of the top 5 that year, with Gary Payton being number 2, was the number 1 pick, Derek Coleman, who did have several, pretty good seasons, never really became the superstar for the length of time that people thought he would, but still a pretty good player. Chris Jackson, Mahmoud Abdul Rauf is what he would change his name to, averaged nearly 20 points a game for several seasons with the Denver Nuggets. You had 3-point specialist Dennis Scott, who shot 40% from the three-point line for his career. You had Kendall Gill, who played for 15 years, so there was longevity there, and was a very good role player, averaging 13 points and 4 rebounds. There was a little bit of magic, I guess you could say, in the second round as well, because you had players like Tony Kukoc taken early in the second round by the Chicago Bulls. Cedric Ceballos had a long career, mostly with the Phoenix Suns and LA Lakers, was a pretty decent scorer, and did have 3 20-point-per-game seasons. You had a sleeper like Eldon Campbell taken in the 27th pick by the Los Angeles Lakers, so at the bottom of the first round. And he ended up being a pretty good role player on some LA Laker teams that were kind of rebuilding. Lasted 14 years in the league and averaged 10 points and 6 rebounds. But the rest of the top 10 that year featured names like Felton Spencer, Bo Kimball, Willie Burton, Ramil Robinson, and Lionel Simmons. Hardly names that make you think of great NBA careers. Other first-round picks that year featured players like Lloyd Vaught, Alec Kessler, Dave Jamerson, Terry Mills, Gerard Mustaf, and Gerald Glass. D. Brown did make noise as a guy that won the NBA dunk contest, but outside of that, his career was pretty nondescript. And Jason Williams became a pretty good rebounder for a while for the New Jersey Nets, then New Jersey Nets, now Brooklyn Nets, but he also is infamous for being involved in the death of a chauffeur driver that was at his home. So the second round really didn't prove much more outside of the names I've given earlier. You had people like Kevin Pritchard, Greg Foster, Marcus Liberty, Tony Smith, Sean Higgins. There just wasn't much there. The 1990 draft is pretty forgettable in the NBA. The next and last draft I want to highlight is the last draft of the 1990s, and that would be the 1999 NBA draft. My axe to grind with this draft is that it just didn't have star power. There were some solid players. The top three that year was Elton Brand, Steve Francis, and Baron Davis. Elton Brand was a 2010 player for a while. While not being flashy, he was effective. Steve Francis was a really good offensive player, and his prime just didn't last that long. And Baron Davis had a really solid career, bounced around a little bit. Charlotte, the Golden State Warriors, and the LA Clippers, just to mention a few of the teams that he played for. When you go beyond that, there was still some talent in the top 10, which featured Lamar Odom, Jonathan Bender, Wally Zerbiak, Richard Hamilton, Andre Miller, Sean Marion, and Jason Terry. Actually, pretty good players. I would say out of that group, the best to me was probably Richard Hamilton and Sean Marion. When you get outside of that, there's a lot of, dead spots between good players. Corey Maggette lasted for a long time, but who the heck is Frederick Weiss, who the New York Knicks took number 15? He never appeared in one NBA game. You had players like Quincy Lewis, Kenny Thomas, Tim James, Vonteego Cummings. I mean, who are these guys? Jermaine Jones. One bright spot was Andrei Kirilenko, AK-47, picked by the Utah Jazz number 24. He was still playing in Europe, so it would be a couple years before they would actually get him, but he ended up being a really good player. You also had a lot of players in the second round that never played a game. Tyrone Washington, Lewis Bullock, Galen Young, Vincent Hamilton, Melvin Levette, Chris Clack. I mean, they never suited up for one NBA game. The lone bright spot in the second round that really made an impact to me is Manu Ginobili, who was the second to last player selected in the draft by the San Antonio Spurs and had a long, productive career with them and won several NBA titles. But outside of that, not really much to say about the 1999 NBA draft. So hey, there it is. To me, those are your worst drafts in the NBA of the 1990s. What do you think? Was there a draft that I should have maybe put in place in the 90s as opposed to the two that I picked? Can't wait to read your comments. And thank you for watching. Please comment, share, like, and subscribe. And as always, I will see you in the next video.